Hello. I'm attorney Irving Pinsky, and today I'm going to interview a couple of my friends mostly about Occupy, but as I like to wander, we'll probably wander. And please introduce yourself. Go ahead, Eric.
I'm Eric Stowe, a community activist from Hamden, and very pleased to be here with you, Irv.
And Michael.
I'm Michael Pelagatti, also known as Pella by my friends. I am a philosophically radical tour guide in New York City.
Who spent years working with Occupy and still does.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why he came down. I have one more important thing to say. If you want to friend him, is it okay if I tell them that they might friend you? They can try if they want.
You can try to friend me, but
if you want to try to friend him, use the following title. Go ahead.
You should message me and let me know who you are beforehand, because normally I block most friend requests.
Right, under the name P-E-L-L-A.
Pella Libertas, Libertas.
And if you want to friend Eric, go ahead.
I'm the generally known on Facebook as the Polar Bear, and I'm under my own name, no assumed identity.
E-R-I-C-S-T-O-E. W-E. S-T-O-W-E, yeah. And anyway, we're going to talk about the history of Occupy and where it is today and where it might go. And of course, so much conjecture, but somebody's got to talk about it, so we figured we'd talk about it in New York and Connecticut because it's got potential. The movement has a lot of potential. And so I just want to say that a lot of you don't even know what Occupy is, but that's okay. It was, and I'm going to leave it to Pella to explain what he thinks it was, and he knows better than me.
Well, where do I begin with this? Occupy started off originally as a small group of a bunch of malcontents. We have college students who are mad about this student loans skyrocketing. You have some former activists involved with the Iraq War, anti-nuclear proliferation, so on and so forth. So based on a half-serious suggestion from Adbusters magazine when they suggested that we should have a Tahrir Square moment in the United States, there was a guy named Mika White who he was involved sort of, but not really, with New York. And he created this illustration of a ballerina dancing on a bull, and it was a meme. It said, what is our one demand? Occupy Wall Street, September 17th, bring a tent. So this happened on July 13th, 2011. And many of the different activist organizations in New York, you had New Yorkers Against Budget Austerity Cuts, you had Workers' World Party, the United National Anti-War Coalition. Many different organizations were involved with a listserv, an email list that got this meme. And basically a protest was more or less organized by all these different organizations. But to cut the long story short, on September 17th, the day came, you had about 2,000 people that came to Bowling Green. That's where Occupy originally was. It was down at Bowling Green Park, and we tried to put a ballerina on the bull, but that didn't work. So we went up to Zuccotti Park. It was a POP, it was a privately owned public space, and we camped out there for about 57 days, although the action in and of itself was only supposed to last for 2 weeks.
Now, Bowling Green, where is that? There's a famous city by that name, so tell them what you mean by Bowling Green.
Bowling Green is one of the original areas of New York City. It's down by where the Bull is, adjacent to the Native American Museum, which is morbidly ironic, considering that was where the fort was, where Native Americans were more or less dealt with by the Dutch. So yeah, but that's where Bowling Green was. So yes, there was a Bowling Green massacre, but it had happened many, many, many hundreds of years ago.
Kelly, I'll tell Kelly.
Yes.
Anyway, and Eric, you were more involved with Occupy where?
Well, I went down to Washington, D.C., as well as looked at what was going on in the New Haven Green. It's interesting, I don't mean to differ with Pella, but I do think that there was an underswelling of political dissatisfaction that had been building in the country. And I don't know if you want to contrast neocons or neoliberals, but I think the whole consciousness, and I coined the term revolution, consciousness revolution that went with the information age back in the late 80s. And this was a realization that the government mechanisms that we have kind of taken for granted as taxpayers weren't necessarily going to look at any aspect of civil interests. That there wasn't going to be a commonality of purpose to where resources are being allocated, that this was being removed from us on many, many levels and being hijacked for corporate purposes. And I think the epitome to this, to me, the real birth of the consciousness revolution was 2008 with the financial collapse. Because we have had we have this great experiment, the United States of America, and we have a really incredibly unique foundation, political document that outlines civil rights and really is the birth of liberalism, which means that individuals are the center of political power, not some centralized institution, that political power should emanate from the individual and the uniqueness of the individual. And this was a very radical thought in the 1770s, but it's really vital to where we've come and embracing the forefathers' vision. And this is about value creation. And to me, the Occupy movement is all about the crisis of value creation that the humankind, mankind, has to address if we're going to survive.
I don't entirely disagree with that assessment. When most people ask me, what was Occupy Wall Street? And I said it was a modern-day Hooverville at the foot of wealth and power, and it was our way of indirectly telling people that, you need to stop sacrificing the public dime to keep propping up these institutions that have more money than God.
Let me ask you a question again. What year was Bowling Green? What year?
What
Bowling Green, the Bowling Green before Zuccotti Park. What year was that? 2011? 2008?
Well, no, that was 2011, where Bowling Green was the first day.
Okay.
And we found out based on from various sources, from what I've heard, that there was a privately owned public space that we could take place in. It was Zuccotti Park, also known as Liberty Square. POPs did not have any regulations that said that you couldn't sleep in a park or not sleep in a park, or that you couldn't rally or protest. They just said no bicycling or skateboarding. So it's a loophole that we took advantage of.
Did you have lawyers at that time?
Did we have lawyers? Not to my knowledge, but we probably.
Were you ever involved? I know I did some court work there with them, and the National Lawyers Guild
Yes,
helped you guys
I know
out.
the NLG was like.
Might have been a little later.
Right, that didn't come till maybe a week or two later, but
Okay.
I don't remember the NLG so much being around on the first
And
day.
income inequality is sort of like a major thing that you guys have in
Absolutely.
common here talking about. But and now what do? You actually have. I know you're not in business, but you work. But sometimes you run tours of Occupy.
Yes, I do.
What could you tell me about that?
Basically, I run a tour about my experience with Occupy Wall Street, but also in the greater context of other social movements that have happened in the area of Lower Manhattan. Like, I'll bring up ACT UP. I'll bring up the National Organization of Women and their protest in 1970. I'll bring up an Underground Railroad location that was on Wall Street that no other tour guide talks about. And I'll also bring up the Upton Sinclair protests of Standard Oil in the early 1900s. So I bring up all these protests and I kind of mix and mesh it with my own personal experience, having lived at Zuccotti Park and having lived the recent chapter of the people's struggle here in the United States.
Somebody told me you were self-educated. And but is that pretty much true?
Yeah, that's pretty much. I'm an autodidact, as they say. I dropped out of college for Occupy Wall Street. I was sitting in my sociology class, and my sociology professor was saying, "Oh, we're going to study about Occupy Wall Street today," and it just kind of clicked in my head. I'm like, no, you don't get to teach me about myself. You know, I'm living here. This is my history that I am participating in. So I could be sitting here in college learning about something that I'm doing out of college, or I could keep doing stuff and not worry about the college stuff. So I dropped out and dedicated my life to Occupy Wall Street at that time.
Now, you're very educated too, and I don't know where and stuff like that, but you speak well. And what do you have any awareness of what Occupy is doing nowadays, or has it sort of drifted away from you?
Well, no, I think it's interesting that I constantly run up against people who state that Occupy is over, and somehow that it died in this camping environment. And the back retort that I get from my right-wing friends is that, well, these people had to get back and get a real job and earn a living. And I really take great exception to that, to explain that the people that I know are involved in the Occupy movement had jobs. And they weren't just loafing around occupying free space down on the green. The thing that I was really struck by is in every city that I saw the Occupy movement, it was largely manned by Vietnam veterans who knew how to bivouac and knew how to set up tents and camps and kitchens and electronic charging stations and small computer systems and laptops and hook up Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and start communicating with each other about issues that are about human survival. And what I was starting to get to before is I think that there was a real pivotal moment where mankind has to realize that our document, our civil rights that come out of the Declaration of Independence, are an acknowledgement of individual value creation, that we value the individual and we want to propagate the life of the individual, not marginalize it. And you have these think tank, politics of scarcity kind of database-oriented institutions that have now been given citizenship. They have rights that are greater than ours as individuals, as that are tromping on our civil rights. And you don't want to marginalize people. That's destroying your value creation base. You want to give people resources and allow them to be as creative and as productive as possible, not as restricted as possible. And that was really the consciousness revolution that was born out of this total rejection of scarcity and the politics of scarcity that the banking industry was thrusting us into this quote-unquote crisis.
A lot of Occupy now is actually, like everything else, a lot of it's on the web. And by that I mean there are whole Facebook communities that people just keep, figuring out what to do in the future and what to do today. And there's all levels of activism, whether it's from growing food to stopping the war to organizing voters.
Sustainability is our new buzzword
It's
on
a big
a
one.
lot of this.
Yeah.
Big one. And do you okay, so you run tours, you have tours of there, and do you know a lot of other people who are still working one way or another and friendly with Occupy? They may not walk around with that label all day, but do you know a lot of people like that still? Do you still see them in New York? I know you see them on Facebook. That's
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, there are still people from the main body of Zuccotti Park that are still active in New York today. Yeah, absolutely. That's not saying that they're going around, saying we're Occupy, but they're doing their own thing.
Can I say what I think of it? All right. Occupy was a coming together of a bunch of different streams of populism.
Yeah.
What happened was the economy crashed, people were thrown out of their homes, millions, people were laid off, millions, people were graduating
Lost
and
the
not being able to
retirement benefits, millions.
and they were not
Yep.
allowed to get their jobs. They weren't able to get jobs. So these people were extremely frustrated, and they acted out in a populist sense.
Yes.
Now, when you have a full economy or you have a war or something, a big war, then they're too busy fighting wars.
Right.
But when they have no food and they're threatened with living in the gutter, then they come together and they protested, and that's probably, since it was very peaceful, Occupy was very peaceful. I think it's a wonderful thing. And then, of course, they filmed the cops spraying these young ladies and guys right in the face as they were kneeling down, and that made it all even more inflammatory. Yeah. But I'm not sure. Oh, did you deal with the lawyers at all after it was over, when the kids had all these arrests pending and stuff?
The only time I've ever dealt with a lawyer, hands down, was after I was arrested on the Brooklyn Bridge. And even
With Cecily?
No, I was not arrested with Cecily. I don't think Cecily was there for that one, but that was March 17th when she was arrested. Brooklyn Bridge was the big one that really catapulted Occupy into the international lexicon, when there was like almost 800 of us that got arrested on the bridge.
What happened?
It was a I don't want to say it was a mismanaged protest, but it got a little. There was about 2,000 people there. It got a little crazy, and one group of about I think the exact count was 780, found themselves on the vehicle roadway, and the others found themselves on the pedestrian pathway. And the NYPD was barely making it audible that nobody could be on the roadway, so nobody heard. And they led these 800 people, including myself, or 780 people. What?
Into paddy wagons,
into a trap, essentially.
Right.
They cut us off at the first tower, and then they surrounded us from behind, and we sort of did an involuntary sit-in for a bit. It was involuntary. We weren't just submitting ourselves for arrest. We were, we were trying to get out of that situation without arrests, but when we realized that we were all going to get arrested, we just kind of sat on the bridge, mockingly sang the Star Spangled Banner, and then the NYPD kicked passengers off the MTA buses to arrest all 800 of us and bring us back to Brooklyn. So that was really the only time I personally dealt with lawyers. I mean, I know lawyers, not involved with protest, like what's his face, Mr. Shockley. He's one of them. But it's kind of.
When you were in jail,
right.
Were there any lawyers also arrested? I know some lawyers who were arrested that day.
I don't know of them personally.
One of them said it was the best night of her life. Being arrested.
I know what's his face. Keegan is going to be a lawyer soon. He's another one that I've come across. There are some Occupy people who are getting into law, but I haven't personally had much experience with lawyers.
What happened when you went to court? Did you go to court?
Okay, this is a funny story. I went to court. We went for my arraignment with the Brooklyn Bridge situation, and what happened was they didn't call my name. And then I went back to court the next day, and they were wondering, why are you here? Because I said, you didn't call my name last time. And they're like, okay, case dismissed.
That's a happy ending. They
Yeah,
dropped the paperwork.
They dropped paperwork for everybody.
With a lot of people, they just brought them back to court so many times that when they finally missed an appointment, then they were glad to take a plea bargain. But they kept bringing them back. And down on Broadway, they have a courthouse where the occupiers kept going back, and there were a whole bunch of National Lawyers Guild lawyers, and they did fantastic work, but it was like shoveling shit against the ocean. It was just hard.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But there's so many. Also, the other problem is that. Did you work with the Light Brigade at all? That's a good answer.
Okay, let me tell you. I'm going to be honest with you.
You can be as honest as you want.
This is a little. This is
Little known fact.
very little known fact that there's the LIGHT Brigade, and then there's the LITE Brigade. I did not work with the LIGHT Brigade. I did not work with the Bright Light Brigade. I worked with another organization or a group of, it was a secret affinity group that we kind of rabble roused and started protests and pushed organizers into doing things underhand. So yeah, there were 2 light brigades. It's funny that you asked that. Being that we're not really together anymore, we can talk more about it nowadays. But yeah, it was a bit of a secret group.
It was a bit of a creative breakthrough, though, the lighting
The
situation.
light brigade was as an LIGHT brigade.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a very creative tactic. It's wonderful. They're making Light Bright relevant again.
Yeah.
Remember Light Brights from the 1980s.
And the symptoms were, I mean, the symbols were just
the
great.
Symbolism. Too bad they haven't synchronized the lights with music. It'd even be much better.
It's difficult, especially since the cops took the van away.
Yeah,
And Ben and Jerry took the van away.
yeah.
And but they're still very active, those guys in New York.
Yeah, they do a very good job. A lot of the Light Brigade are former Occupy people.
Did you ever work with the people in New York?
No, I visited the encampment, but
Yeah.
I didn't really do any
That was packed.
activism.
PACKED, packed. Wow. And also, the interesting thing about New Haven is that New Haven had these police who were the head cop who was running the policing of that area was a registered nurse, and she's a great lady, and she was running, and she's a registered nurse. And when I walked up there, they called me down. I came down and walked across the green, and she saw me walking to them, and she beeped the horn, and I looked at her and I said, "Hey, Rebecca," and she said, "Irv, I got to tell you right now, you better take some psych meds with you over there," because she knew a lot of the protesters from the psych ward when she was a nurse. And later there came a time when one of our protesters got a little bit too off his meds and jumped into a tractor that they were trying to tear down the tents with, and got hauled off to jail without his medicine. And his girlfriend just started crying and bawling and everything. He doesn't have his medicine. He doesn't have medicine. So she said to me, "Irving, help, help." So I called the chief. She was lieutenant then. I said, "Rebecca, he doesn't have medicine." She goes, "Give it to me. I'll take care of it." So I gave her the medicine. And the girlfriend said, "Don't give it to the cops. She'll kill him. She won't give it to him. Don't give it to her. Don't give it to her." And I gave it to her with permission. And she took it to him, and that's what nurses do. So it was a very interesting tension between human beings depending on what uniform or what clothes they're wearing that day. But it worked out okay. And after Occupy, she retired. She retired on a pension. She retired. That was the end of it. And her father, who was a cop in New Haven, he retired and he became a nurse. She retired as a nurse. She became a cop.
That's ironic.
Isn't that cool? And her brother Aaron, later he retired sort of early, quit. He didn't have a pension, quit, and he became a school teacher. The world is a strange place.
Yeah.
Well, you have to have a sense of character and personal responsibility across titles.
And it's nice to be able to choose what we want to do
and
within
just
some limits.
Have people be human and realize that's
That
what
was
it's all
interesting.
about.
And then my dog still occupies the space in New Haven very regularly, and she, right before she shits on Yale, she's a bad dog. She's a rebel. But and then there was an interesting mix between the university kids and the other protesters. There's always going to be tensions whenever you mix people. It's like it just happens. And sometimes it was tragic watching the rejections, and other times it was beautiful watching the melding. But more good
Blending.
writers came out of there than you could ever count. I mean, everybody was writing.
Right. The blogs.
Yeah,
the chat
Tiananmen
rooms.
Square, Tahrir Square. If I knew, I guess, obviously, Occupy New York was by far the biggest, and also now some of them are in Black Bloc, all over. Some, not all, but some.
Yeah, Black Bloc's more of a tactic than.
I love that line,
than,
but it's become both. And
than,
you're one of the first people to say it accurately to me. You accurately said more of. Because a lot of them say, "Pardon me, but Black Bloc is a tactic, not a person."
Yeah.
And I say, well, guess what? The people have co-opted it both ways. And you said it accurately, and for that, I give you 5. All right, that was good. Nobody did that before. So nowadays, what happens is the police are arresting them for felony writing, at least in Washington, which is a tragic overcharging.
Yes.
And you know what kettling is, right? They kettle the.
Well,
You got
I
kettled,
was
brother.
kettled myself, not in Washington, but
On the bridge.
On the bridge, yes.
Bridge.
They drag all these people in. They charge them for existing, and the next thing you know, they drop the charges on you. I'm happy for that. Wow, what an amazing event, which is not over because populism continues. It just might go by different names here and there, and there are rivulets of populisms, whether it's ACT UP or BLM,
Yep.
stuff like that. And it's amazing. Anyway, how much time do we have? I couldn't see that.
2 minutes.
2 minutes? Oh, let me say something again. If you want to reach him, try Pella Libertas at Facebook, or try it through me, Irving Pinsky, and you can also reach Eric Stowe. And if you want to help with it, you're always welcome to contact me too. And my email is irvingpinsky@aol.com. If you have any stories that you want me to do or anything on Occupy or anything, just call me up or email me. And I'm around. I mostly I do personal injury cases, accidents, but that's fighting insurance companies, so that's what I do. But it's interesting, and we're gonna keep protesting because now we have this wonderfully horrible administration, and lock him up. What were you gonna say?
Well, I just wanted to ask Mike. I thought that one of the movement moments where there did seem to be a logjam in the Occupy movement was when Superstorm Sandy hit, and suddenly we had the infrastructure. I mean, the people that wouldn't buy into the movement, the Wall Street regulars, suddenly had the flooding of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel
Yeah.
and the flooding of the New York subways.
Yeah.
And so the evidence for global warming and climate catastrophe couldn't be denied, and suddenly there were more people sympathetic to the point of view that was being expressed in Liberty Park.
And now we've got Exxon as president of the United States. No doubt about that. He couldn't have made it
The
clearer.
United States of Russia.
The United States of
Welcome.
OPEC too.
I'll answer that question off air. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
They did a lot of hard work over Sandy. Sandy was quite the messy scene.
But
Unbelievable,
Sandy
yeah.
was
Far Rockaway.
revolutionary. But I'll explain that